Editing Aiden here. I just got done piecing together three different clips from Kurt and I's fantastic conversation where we get deep into self improvement, sort of where that inspiration to be better comes from, and really a lot of cool things that I didn't really expect we'd get into. But the main reason why we wanted to share this podcast, I mean, it was an assignment for school, but we mainly wanted to share it because we believe it could be genuinely useful. Just having that conversation for like 30 so minutes, uh, we got oddly inspired. I mean, I can't speak for Kurt, of course, but for me at least, I felt really rejuvenated and inspired to really work out these problems with someone who I know could definitely relate to them. And to whatever extent listening to our conversation would inspire other people, that was kind of where our motives were. Now, you'll notice that there's going to be a giant Filmora watermark. It's because I'm not buying a thing yet. If this podcast project keeps going, then obviously we'll definitely make some upgrades. But over our super nuanced, deep conversations, is going to be a giant buy Filmora watermark all over the place. But it's okay. Another note is that throughout our recording, one segment has a video portion, but we ran out of space, so we had to just go to all audio. So there's going to be a cut, and there's two cuts. So our conversation also got interrupted, I think 2 times. So there's basically 3 different segments where we're talking about one thing, and then it gets cut off. But while we were waiting to get back on track, we started picking up a new conversation, and it got all over the place. But you'll notice there's going to be like 3 distinct segments that end randomly and pick back up, but we try to tie it all together towards the end of the podcast. But yeah, like I said, it was a really fantastic conversation. I am really grateful that I got to talk to someone who definitely understood the kind of things that I was talking about, and he offered an insight that I just had never thought to. And that's kind of where our minds were at making this whole thing. So hopefully you take something that we got out of it. So please enjoy. So, I thought it would be fun to, because I think we have very differing opinions on
Right. Yeah.
on a lot of things.
Not as much as we think, though.
I don't think so.
We think that we disagree on things,
I
but
don't-
really we find pretty common.
I think so. I think that's my favorite thing is that I think we have similar conclusions, but different ways we get there. Right? And one thing that I find particularly interesting is when it comes to self-improvement, which I think is a divisive word or a divisive phrase.
Sure.
So, like, how would you define self-improvement or that kind of archetype?
In order to self-improve, you have to, look at what's wrong with you. People are always like, love yourself.
Yeah.
Love who you are. You're perfect in every way. It's like, no, you have to look in the mirror and realize that I have flaws. There are things about me that are bad. Some things about my personality may not be. Everyone's like, oh, everyone's personality is great. That might not be true.
Yeah.
You have to change the way that you act.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be more self-aware. So looking at yourself being like, maybe I don't look the best. I could
Yeah.
look better. I could take better care of myself. I could treat people better. I could break down some of my bad habits in life.
Yeah, I think that's a particularly soft spot with, I think particularly in our peers, like in our teenage culture as of right now, it's not great to say that you need to change things.
Yeah, right.
There's, like everything, 2 sides to that, right? I mean, there's obviously the aspect of don't hate the things that you can't change. Self-hatred, a really cool phrase I really like is that you don't get to kill yourself every time you make a mistake.
Right.
You don't get to do that, So you can't be so hard on yourself for those things. But at the same time, it's just saying everything about me is perfect the way it is.
Right.
I just think that's just wrong in every sense. Because if you've once thought I wish I was better at something,
Right.
then that whole argument falls apart.
And sometimes, as long as it's in a controlled way, being hard on yourself can be a good thing. It can be a good thing if it's not over the top.
Yeah.
If you're you're allowed to get mad at yourself because that can
Yeah.
be motivation to get
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. That's. What do you think? Do you think that self-improvement has to be motivated by that sort of I'm not enough, I have to then
No.
become enough?
No, because there's a lot of factors. I mean, if you look at the teenage sad boy, damn, she broke my heart.
Yeah.
And now I gotta get ripped. It's that is definitely an aspect of that.
Yeah.
Of just being some people use it as an outlet for I
Yeah.
know for myself, when I first started within the gym and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It wasn't about self-improvement, really. It was about, I was going through a hard time, like depression. My dad was like, wanted to help me the only way he knew how. He's not the type of guy where he wants to get me medicated and wants to send me to a therapist.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy where he wants to do what he knows is good for his brain and
Yeah.
work out and take that stress and that depression out and make it into something good.
Yeah. So do you think, at least for me, I think of self-improvement as very much so responsibility. So, I mean, I read and listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson. So whenever I think of a thing, I go like, oh, well, Peterson said that. It's a Peterson-esque thing. Doesn't mean Peterson came up with it.
Yeah, right.
But like a Peterson-esque thing is like, so long as you're a person interacting with other persons,
Right.
you have a responsibility to be a good person, right? Because if you're not up to scratch, then you are going to make a net harm to everyone around you.
Right.
So I think on one end is like a responsibility. Do you think, how far do you think that responsibility goes? Do you think that's more of like a bare minimum, far beyond? Do you think self-improvement is more for you or for other people at the end of the day?
I think it's a mix. It's not about like, when you say other people, it's definitely not about other people that aren't relevant to you. Like,
Yeah.
there's gonna be people in like high school and just life and work in general that you don't really care about. They're not
Yeah.
like your friends, but they're giving you their opinion. And some people may be like, oh, I want to prove that person wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, that's okay, but I don't think that's a good route. A better route would be like, I want to be better for my family, for my parents. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better brother.
Yeah.
I want to be a better boyfriend, better husband. Using those people, the people that make your core of who you are, using those people as a route of deciding to self-improve is probably the best
Yeah.
way to look at it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And also like, this isn't an interview, right? So like,
Well, I mean, where do you think that came from? And where do you think this whole like culture of everything's perfect, you're great? Where do you think that what the origin of that was?
so I think the quickest answer is to go like political correctness, liberal culture. And I think fair enough. But I think more importantly, do I think there's some cabal of liberals trying to soften everyone up? I don't think so. But I think back in the day, right, and I've done some expert studies, so I'm very qualified. But to me, from my understanding, right, is that the stereotypical masculine way to go was like just toughen up,
Yeah, right.
and like that falls through eventually.
Yeah,
So
at some point.
right, and then so once you have like generations of that going on, there's going to be some inherent counter pushback to that.
Sure.
And I think the answer to that, my dad was really harsh on me,
Right.
was I'm not going to be harsh to my kid.
Sure.
And then maybe that was like a recent development, but at the end of the day, it is easier, I think, to say that you're fine the way you are.
Yeah, I feel like in a country where now I feel like there's two sides of a coin, that's it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah, yeah.
left and there's right.
Yeah.
I think that it was, if you look at like the pre-2000s, there was a lot of just right agenda, conservative stuff, and
Yeah.
I think that basically when one side gets really strong, the other side comes to crush it.
Yeah,
And I think we're
almost
seeing,
always.
And I think we've seen throughout our generation,
Yeah.
the left kind of come and take control of what our country, I guess. And I think that on the flip back, you're going to see another flip eventually at some point. Like, I think that people were like, I think it started like bullying too. Like, people were like anti-bullying.
Yeah.
It's like, because people did used to get bullied back in the day. Like, my parents, like, generation, I'm sure, got like, that was like a real thing. But in our generation, you don't really see bullying. It's not in the way that you would.
No, not in the way
like,
that you would, yeah.
A movie about like
Yeah.
1980s high school.
Yeah.
It's a lot different. Like, usually the kids who think they're like so super cool are the ones that get bullied, not the nerdy, like, smart kids.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point in a classic example of, I think, two ideas getting conflated. So you have the anti-bullying prerogative of like bullying needs to stop, but that gets lumped into like actual useful criticism.
Yeah, right.
So
Exactly.
right, and then when you start using those words interchangeably, then you get a lot of confused people. But like it's like bullying is, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, I don't think has a net good to any extent.
No.
But like.
But things are like you said, things are called bullying that aren't. Like
Right,
telling
yeah, yeah.
someone, dude, you're a jerk. You're not
Yeah.
like a nice. You're
Yeah.
being like a really like hard person to be around.
Yeah.
You're very like self-indulgent. You don't really think about other people. Saying that to somebody would be considered like bullying now, but it's just giving it to them straight. Like you're telling them this is something you could fix about yourself. This is something that would make you a more likable person.
Yeah, like, and people don't talk about how important critical thinking is and critical opinions. So, like a good example is that I don't know if you know any like dudes that are way too old to be acting the way that they are.
Yeah.
Like I have a coworker who like dropped out of high school sophomore year and just quite literally acts like a sophomore bully, and he's like 22.
Right.
The only reason why that happens is because he was allowed to act like that his entire life.
Right.
And everyone around him just like, oh, well, that's just Mason, right? But how important that is to have people to like check you and say like, hey,
Right.
that's not okay. This is the way to go. And obviously that has downsides, like everything. But I think it's a shame that gets like called bad too.
What point in your like life do you think that you, as like average person, like I'm talking about your personal experience, but also just most
Yeah.
people in general, do you think that you get that like big wave of like, I need to change kind of who I am? I feel like there's like, for me, I feel like there's like a point
Yeah.
when you like realize I need to make a change.
Yeah.
Like I need to grow up, I need to mature, I need to change the way I think about people.
I know for me personally, I moved here for middle school and then moved back for freshman year to Indiana, and at that point it was like just way too much change, way too fast,
Right.
and then I had like a real sense of aimlessness, and I think that's a common thing. Like, oh, I was lost, and then I found this, and da da da. But like to such an extent where it's not like depression's one thing, but when you're depressed and aimless and all that you're doing is just existing,
Right.
like everyone would hear that and go, okay, that something needs to be done about that. You know, get a medication, get a therapist, whatever.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people do that and just don't call it an issue. A lot of people just kind of like float like that and they're not
Right.
moving.
Exactly.
But for me, I remember like my dad is one of the like only people that I think I'm like minded to someone, and he just sent me. I was telling him about like, yeah, like shit sucks, and then he was like, all right. He just mailed me a bunch of books. That's it. He was
Right.
like, here's a bunch of books, and it's like, see what happens. Like if read them, don't. If it works out, great. Doesn't, whatever.
Wow.
And one of them just so happened to be like this intro to Buddhist philosophy. Just so happened to be, right?
Right.
But like when I finally learned, and we're seeing at least written and contextualized, this notion of like, yes, everything sucks. True.
Yeah.
And like,
Right.
yeah, and like that Buddhist 101, life is inherently suffering. Now what are you going to go do about that?
Right.
And
Just accept it.
yeah, it's like a call to action to some extent.
That almost plays in like stoicism, like accept that
Yeah.
there's nothing you do about the fact that life is harsh and sucks, but you can control how you react to the harshness.
Yeah, and then once you realize that like this is only as bad as you're gonna let it be.
Right.
And some things are just going to be bad, and there's nothing you can do about that. But
Right.
the difference between pain and suffering, right? Once you realize that you can do that, but you have to know how to, and you have to set yourself up to be able to do that. For me personally, it was like, why would I do anything else? Nothing is more important than that,
Right.
to some extent, because of real priority.
Exactly.
But like, I mean, I know I've heard your dad getting you into the gym and saying like, oh, that's not me. But like, what was your like flipping point for that?
Like I guess the gym played a factor in that, but it wasn't the root
No.
cause. It was almost like that was a symptom of
Yeah.
the whole situation. Was okay. Now I'm gonna go look better and get bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess it was really like middle school. I feel like everybody's like a jerk. Everybody's an ass.
Everyone's a tyrant.
Everyone's mean to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's like mean to like. Middle school is when you see real bullying.
Yeah.
High school you don't see high school bullies. Really.
No, yeah.
I mean, at least I've never like actually seen a high school
no.
bully. But in middle school, I think everybody's like kind of a bully. And I felt like I was kind of like, I wanted to have a lot of friends, and I did have a lot of friends, and I took a step back and realized like I'm kind of being like a bully. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a bully to the little guy, you know,
Yeah.
like the nerdy smart guy, but I am being a bully to certain people that like they don't deserve me to be like being like a jerk like this. I'm being mean to my own friends. Like this isn't a
Yeah.
way to have friends.
Yeah.
And I realized like I don't want to be that person anymore. I realized something. I remember I think it might have been like watching a movie, talking to my dad. I think it was when my dad would run into people from his high school, right?
Mm.
And all the people from high school, there would be like these like guys who were like you could tell they were nerdy in high school.